All right, so um, we're going to continue from where we stop. Today we're going to be starting with units and measurements in the CSS because when you want to apply some properties on your element, or when you want to apply some declaration on your element there through CSS, there are some of these elements that deal with measurement. Or you need to measure. So what, for example, like what is the width of this element, or what is going to be the height of this element, or this particular element here, what is going to be the radius of it. So some of these property here, they are based on measurement. And when you are dealing with measurement, some of the value you are going to supply, you need to put the units that you want to use. And based on the units, the CSS knows how to, or the browser knows how to calculate the final value that is going to use for that particular property. And we have a lot of properties that you are going to be seeing later on that deal with measurement. Some of them is this padding here, like this. Under borders, so you are going to see it. When you're dealing with height and width, you are going to see it. Margins, anything that deal with the length or measuring of the box. So you always use units to specify the value there like that. And in CSS, we have these two categories of units. So we have the absolute units and we have the relative unit. You know, from our linking now, you should know what this one too is in. So absolute doesn't change. It always remain the same. So pixels, it doesn't change no matter what is going on the page. It will always remain the value that you gave to it. But when you're talking about relative, all this one, they are not standing alone. They are depending on something on the page. And if whatever they depend on change, they will recalculate their new value. Or anytime you're using them, they will always be based on what they depend on. And whatever the value that thing is holding, that's what they will use to calculate their own final value. But if you're talking about this absolute, it's always the same. So no matter what is going on the page, it will never change. The one I'm going to be explaining here under this absolute is this PX, because that's how your screen has been measured there like that. But these are, you know, other all these centimeter, meter, inches, and so forth like that. So you can use them too, but the behind the scene they will still get converted to these pixels. Even all these relative too, they will get converted to these pixels, but they are depending on something for them to get their final value. For all this one, you just do your normal calculation from here to here, and whatever you get, that's what is always going to hold. It will never change. But relative, you don't just put the value directly like that. There is something on the page they are depending on, and once that thing change, it will recalculate its new value there like that. And as a developer, you should be able to know what the browser is doing behind the scene, because when you apply some property later on, the thing might not be working the way you're expecting it to work. So how do you see what the browser is doing? So every browser comes with what we call developer tools. So every browser comes with developer tools, and in order for you to open it, just go to your menu here, the three dots. You go to these more tools, and as you can see here, you are going to see the developer tools, which is what I will always be using these shortcuts to bring it out there. So once you click on it, you see that it's going to pop out. My own is popping out on this side because that's where I want it to be. But some people, it will pop out from the bottom, or not like the bottom up or from the right, because you can actually put it to any side that you want. And again, too, because of the browser I'm using, it's putting some of these actions here by this side. For your own, it's not going to be like that. It will arrange everything at the top like this, which is something I can return back to the way things I used to be. So everything is going to be at that top, and depending on how wide is your system and the browser you're using, but the text is always going to be the same thing. But here now, as you can see, it's representing it as icon, but if you click on any one of them, that's when it will now bring out the text. And that's why I don't like it in this way. I always love to put it side here so that I can quickly click on any one of them that I need. But this is how it's going to be by default. And as you can see, it's not showing everything. You have to click on, depending on how wide is this thing. So if there's no space, as you can see, it will add a lot of them. You have to click on this thing to bring out different tools that you can use as a developer to know what is going on the page there. So later on, when we are dealing with JavaScript, that's when we'll be using this console here to see the results later on. But the one we actually need right now is this element. But this element now, it gives you what is going on with your HTML code and along with the CSS code there. So as you can see, everything that we type from HTML here, we're seeing everything here. And as you can see, it's live. So if you go to any one of them, it will tell you where that thing is on the page. So that H1 now, that is it there. And I can see there's some other thing beside it that we're going to be talking about when we get to box model property. So if I go to this div, as you can see, it's telling me that div now, this is where it is on the page. And if you click on it, it will tell you whatever CSS that the browser is using on that element there. And as you can see that it's having this display of block. That's why I mentioned that time that there's some element that are block element and some of them are inline element. Look at the property that the browser is applying by default. So these are just default setting or default CSS that we have on the div. If I go to H1 you see that H1 have block, and that's the reason why you can see other content beside them. So if I go to where we have A, for example here now this OL, open it, then click on the A, like that. So the A, it's going to give me the style for it. If it's having any style, or as you can see here, any link, this is the color, this is whatever that is going on, and this is some other styling. So whatever that is going on with any of your element, you are going to see it inside this box for the element. And once you click on it, down here under the styles, you are going to see, so you are going to see all the styling for that particular element here. And sorry. So, and it's something that you need to know because you need to see what the browser is actually doing behind the scene. And as you can see, some of this value here, can you see that it's ending with this EM, or some of them are ending with these pixels? Because when you are dealing with CSS, some of the property you are going to be working with, they need units. And the pixels we are seeing here is what we want to talk about, part of what we are going to be talking about today. And the pixels is part of this absolute unit, while this EM is part of this relative unit, as you can see it at the end here. But the one I'll be talking about under this side is this pixels, and the one I'll be talking about this one for now is going to be this side like that. I see other one that I've omitted here that's supposed to be there. So let me increase this thing a little bit. So go up. So under this side, we're supposed to have something here, which is going to be FR, which is fractional unit, but I won't be using it now. When you get to the property that needs it, that's where I'm going to bring it, because there's some stuff I need to explain first before you start using it like that. So when you want to give some of this your property or some of the elements, the property, some of this property is depending on units, and the units that you want to use is depending on what how you want that element to behave. But I'm going to explain them in general there. And what is this absolute? Just like what I mentioned before, absolute units are useful anytime you know that whatever that is happening on the page is not going to affect the element or that measurement. That's where absolute it's going to comes in there. For example, here now, let me select this my H1, and this H1, let me give you background color of red so that you can see it, that we are targeting all the H1 on the screen like that. So the color should be yellow. But now I don't want the width. You can see now everything is getting to the edge. I don't want them to get to the edge. I want them to stop at a particular width. So here now I can use the width property. I will talk more about it when we get to the side that we're going to be using it. But for now, I'm using it to explain all these units. So now I'll be using this 150 px. Can you see what happened now? So the element is not going to get wider again. So it's going to stop where I put this value. But the value we are using right now we are using absolute units there, which means no matter what is going on the page, this thing will only remain that 150 px. So whether the screen change or the screen did not change, or you increase something somewhere or not, it will always remain the same 150. So if you click on this one now, can you see it will tell you whatever css and where it's coming from. So this thing is telling us where the css is coming from, and the property is applying on that element. So from here now, you already know where this element is getting its style, because the element can get its style from different places, not just with this selection alone. For example, here now, assuming I give that element a class, now I can target it to, and it's going to pick all the style that it can find for that element. For example, here now, this one is having heading. So save it, go back to that page, so I can target it to based on this heading, and the text decoration now is going to be underlined like this. So save, as you can see, the first one is now underlined, but the second one is not. Why? Because this one did not have the class. It's only this one. And as you can see now, can you see that it's telling you where it's getting all the CSS fonts? So it's not that you always put it inside one selector. You might have different selector which is targeting the same, like they are targeting the same element. So if you come here now, you see where this your element is taking all its style. It will tell you the file and the line where it's coming from, which is telling us that this thing is coming from line 7. In case maybe there's a problem with this thing now, what you just do is to quickly go to that line and you see that it's the same thing there. So you quickly modify whatever you need to do on that line. But that's not the major thing here. The major thing we're after here is this 150 px. And as you can see, nothing is happening with this element. It will always stay whatever value that you gave to it. So this is what you are doing here. But how do you see what the browser is actually, what's the final value that the browser is using? So that's where we have this computed. Like everything after it has converted whatever it needs to convert, you are going to see all the value on that display. And if you scroll down, as you can see, the width is still 150 pixels. It doesn't change because your screen is measured in pixels. But if you use other units, you see that it will still convert it to pixels by the time it's done with all the computation, but the value will still not change. So inches will always be inches. It doesn't get affected by anything that is going on the screen. But we don't use centimeter or this other unit. You can use them, but you don't see people use it like that because the conversion will still go back to the px there. Why not use px directly instead of you using all this stuff? For example, here now, save this one. As you can see, is using inches now, which I use 1 inch, or I can just use 10 inches. As you can see, it's getting wider, or I can use 3 inches. It will still work, but behind the scene, can you see now that's getting converted to the normal px. What you type is what is under the style. As you can see, this is what you type, but the final value that the browser is using is what we have under this computed here. So it has already converted that your inches to pixels. So, and this is what the 3 inches is giving us in pixels like that. But instead of you doing it like this, why not just type the pixels directly? Instead of giving the browser work to do, why not just type 288 pixels if that's what you want to use, and we still have the same result. So you only see pixels being used anytime you need a static measurement or unit there. But this is not what you want every time. There's some time you want the weight of this element here to be depending on its parent. So if the parent is 300, then I want what is inside it to take half of that parent. See now, the child is depending on the parent's measurement there. So, and that's where relative unit comes in. So when you need to depend on something on a page, you always use relative. But if you don't want to depend on anything, and this thing will never get affected by what is going on the page, what you always go with is pixels. So whether you're on a mobile screen or you're on desktop screen, it will always maintain this 288 that we are using. And this thing doesn't care whether the stuff is going outside. Even if the thing is, as you can see, it doesn't care. It will always maintain that size like that. So it doesn't change at all. So, and that's pixels there. But this is not what we want. As the browser is changing in width, we want our content to change in size so that the thing is going to be perfectly fit on that screen. That's how you go to a site. The way you see it on mobile is not the same way you see it on the desktop are there. And in order for you to achieve some of these things, you need to use this relative unit to be able to change some stuff based on what is going on the screen like that. And the first one that we explain here is this rem unit. So this rem here, we use it anytime you want your value to depend on the font size of the HTML. By default, HTML have a default font size that is using, and that's what you see that all this your paragraph or H1, they're actually depending on it. Once you change the font size of your browser now, you see that everything too will change in size. For example, here, if I go to the setting, here under the setting, let's just search for font size there so that it can bring it out. Font size, where's my font size? Yeah, so let me open it. This is not what I want. Appearance. Where are you? Yeah, so as you can see, it's on the default here. So now I can change it to very small or very large, or change it to anything that I want. Can you see what happened on the page? See that everything too gets larger. You know, I did not touch any of them. What I did this is just to increase the browser font size, and everything got like increased there. All this thing. So if you check them now, you see that the value, the final value they are using, it's quite different from what is there before. So you go up, look at the, if you look at the font size of this element, so it's not showing everything. To show all, what we can just do is to click on this item, and it's going to show, because we are not the one setting it and the browser is not setting them. So these are the default setting if you don't change them. And the one we want here is the font size that is on that element. So this one is set by the browser. That's why it's showing like that. So font under the font size, as you can see, the font size of P is what? 24px. Now let me go back to the setting and change it to whatever it is there before, or even change it to another value. Go back to the page there and check again. So let me click on this and click on this my P. Can you see what is now there? 16. See that it's changing based on what is going on the page. So because why is it changing? It's because this thing is using relative unit behind the scene there. And when that relative unit sees what is depending on, what that thing change, it will calculate the new value for you. And one of them here is this rem. And what is rem use? Rem, the way it gets its value is based on the font size of the HTML, which is what I just changed now. So you can change the font size of the HTML. By default, the font size of the HTML is just 16 if you don't change it. So if you go under the computed and look for the font size here, you see that it's just 16 by default. If you don't change it, it's because I'm using that medium, whatever stuff. If you change it now, it will update the value here. And based on the value you have on your HTML, that's what this rem will now depend on to calculate its value. So which means here now, instead of us using these 288 pixels here, if I use 20 rem, so what is now going to be the final value of this thing? Here. We need to still convert it to pixels. But what is going to be the final value? The final value here is going to be this 20 multiplied by the font size of HTML. So which means here now, the final value here is going to, can you see what it's showing? There's an extension that is doing that conversion for me, and is using 16 by default to calculate. So which means the final value we are going to get here is going to be 320 by the time you go to the page. That one, if the font size is 16 pixels. So if you go back to the H1 now and check the width, let me hide this one that we don't need so that it doesn't show what we are not changing. There, can you see that we are getting the value 320? What we type there is 20 rem, but the final value that we're getting is this 320. So where is it getting this 320 from? So the rem, anytime you are using it, whatever number you have beside rem will be multiplied by whatever the font size of this HTML. And by default, HTML is using font size of 16px. So which means the final value here is going to be 20 times 16. And that's the reason why we are getting this 320. Now if I go back to that place and update the stuff, because the medium is just using 16, but I can update it to this large. So since we updated this into large, and go back to our page there. So check this thing again. Can you now see what is showing? You see that we did not remove, it's still 20. You see that if you go back to the style, it's still 20 rem, but now the value is now 400. Before it is 320, but now the value has changed to 400. Why? If you check the HTML and check the font size that you have on it, you are going to see that the font size has changed because we changed the font size from the browser setting. So when you are dealing with relative, they are always depending on something, and whatever they are depending on, once that thing change, they will recalculate their own value too. Even though we are not changing the value from our own code, the value did not change. What we had there is still 20 rem. But by the time we get to the browser and we get under the computer here, it's telling us we have 400. Why? Because the font size of this one has changed. And since the rem is depending on the font size of this one, it will see that that value has changed. And since the value has changed, it will recalculate the new value. And that's how the rem work. Anytime you are using rem, notice that that value beside it will always be multiplied by the font size of the HTML, which is something I can check from the code. I don't need to be doing it from the from here. You can update it from the code too if you want. So let me go to the default one, which is 16. When it is medium like this, it is 16 by the. You don't change any browser setting on the font. It is always 16. All browser, even on mobile, they set it to 16 by default, but you can change it. And once the user change it, then everything that is going on the page that is using rem2, they will recalculate their value. And that's why it is relative there, because it's depending on what is going on with the font size of HTML. It doesn't care about the font size of the element that you're using. It doesn't care about the font size of this H1. It only care about the font size of HTML. But what if you care about the font size of the element or the parent? If that element did not have font size, that's where the EM comes in. So we have EM and we have rem. So the one, this rem, this one only focus on HTML. It doesn't focus on anything. But this one now is dynamic. It's depending on whether this element has font size or not. So if the element has font size, it will use it to calculate the value. If the element did not have it, then it will check the parent of the element. If that parent did not have it, it will keep checking the parent. Then if none of them is having it, that's when it will now go to HTML. And that's why this one is always hard to explain, because the one said we used to change a lot depending on whether the element is having font size or not, or its parent is having or not, or parent or grandparent. So you have to look for the one that is having font size, and that's the one that you use there like that. So which means here, if this one, if I give it font size of 20 pixels like this, it will never use it. It will always focus on the font size of the HTML, which is the 16. So if you go back there again and we check this computed value for this stuff, scroll down, and on that, as you can see, is still 320. The only time it will change is when the font size of HTML change, which is something we can update too from here. Don't forget, we can select our HTML too by using the type selector. So here now, change the font size that we have on it. Maybe I want to use 10 pixels. Save it. As you can see, a lot of things have changed on the screen because they are depending on this font size. And if you go back there now and check, can you see now the weight is now 200, because it will multiply what? The whatever number you have beside rem, and this is 20, then here we have 10. 20 times 10, it will give us 200 px as the final value. So when you're using rem, you look at the font size of the HTML, and that's what you multiply by whatever number you have beside rem. If the font size change on the HTML, it will recalculate the value. You don't need to do anything from your side. It will recalculate the value automatically there. So 20 rem is what we have, but the final value we are getting is changing based on the font size of the HTML, because that's what rem always depend on. So anytime you see me using rem, whatever number you see beside it, just multiply by the font size of HTML. And by default, the font is always 16. If you don't change it like what I did on this line that I'm changing it, by default, it's always 16 pixels. But if the user change it too from their browser, then you have to see what the user. And that's why you see that when you increase your font size on the phone, when you go to some site, you see that the text too are going to get bigger because they are depending on it. So if you reduce your font size, everything on your phone and the browser too will reduce because they are depending. And that's why I always use rem a lot compared to these pixels. If you use pixels, this one doesn't care. So if you say this thing it should be 200, it will always be 200 no matter what is going on your page. So whether you change something or you don't change anything there. So if I use 200 pixels or if I use 320 pixels here, so say we have 320 pixels, and if you go to computed, you see the same thing that you are going to see. But now let's update our font again back to 10. If you save, not to consider this one, it still be always going to be 3 pixels. So that's absolute. Absolute. They don't change. They don't depend on anything on the screen, or they don't depend on whatever that is changing on the browser. Whatever value that you give to this thing, whether you're mobile, on desktop, or you change anything on your browser, it will always maintain that value, which is really bad for some element on the screen because you want them to change based on some action that the user is carrying out or based on what is going on their browser there. And that's where all these units comes in there like that. So absolute doesn't change, relative will change based on what they depend on. They will only change when the value they are depending on change. So if the value did not change too, it don't change. So the only time they will change is whatever they are depending on change on the screen. And that's the rem, which is always depending on the font size of the HTML. So anytime you are using rem, just know that you multiply the number beside it by the font size of the HTML. And just like the way I mentioned it before, it's only 16. And that's why I have this extension that used to do the conversion for me. I don't need to be using my head to do the stuff. For example, here if I use font size 1.25 rem, you see that it's showing me the value that this thing is going to get by the time it's done computing the value. But this one now, it's assuming that you are using a base font size, which is the 16 pixels. If you change, then it will never be this 20. But by default, we only assume that the font size is 16 if you don't change it, because that's what the browser will use by default, and that is what this extension too is depending on. Which you can even help you to do the conversion in case you want to change it, or you can even from there to go back to that one. So this is an extension that I'm using because I don't need to start doing the calculation in my head. But once you get used to this thing, there's some common value you always use that you already know what they are going to correspond to when it's doing the conversion. For example, now if I need 12 pixels, I know that that's 0.75 rem. So if I need 16 pixels, I know that that's 1 rem because that's the default font size. So multiply by this. No, 1 times anything is always that number. Like that. If I need 32 pixels now, I know that that's 2 rem. Like this, and so forth like that. 1.75. So these are the common value. Not that you just be typing them anyhow. You use some of these common value that the designer is going to be given to you there like that. And all these values are the common one that will be used, because you don't just say design to they'll be designing anyhow or be using value anyhow. They make sure that everything is perfect and it's unique or is the same across the app, not that you just be using a value anyhow there. But you need to know what those value are representing or what is the meaning of the stuff there. So that is the rem. So I mentioned something that time that we want the child to depend on what is going on the parent. So that's where percentage comes in. So when you want a value that will be depending on the parent, then you'll be using this relative of percentage. So for example, here we have this page. So let me go back to the HTML. So if we look at the HTML here, let me reduce this stuff. So if you look at HTML, as you can see, I have this container. Inside the container, I have this H1 and this paragraph. So let me select that container from the CSS. So container like this. So let me give it a background color of red, and at the same time I'm going to give it a width of 350 like this. Inside this container we have H1. I only want to select H1 that is inside container. By now you know what I'm doing. So, and that's why we need to talk about selector first before we get to all this one. So here now I have this element, and if you say now, can you see that it's the H1 by default will cover everything that, like the line that is available for it there. But this is not what I want. I want this my H1 to be half of whatever the parent width is there. So how do we talk to this one? So I want the width of this element now to be half of whatever the width of this container, and that's where the percentage comes in. So here now what I can do is to do 50%. And what does this thing mean? So what this thing is going to do is that it will look at this property on the, wherever you are using the percentage. So the same property, it will go to the parent and look at it. So since you are using width here, so it will go to the parent and look for the width property. Then it will not take the whatever percentage you have here of that parent. So which means the final value of this H1 for the width is going to be 50% of this parent. So which is going to be 50% of 350 px. And now if you save it, you see that it's taking half. So if the parent change, it will recalculate its own half too. But if the parent did not change, it will always stay at that place, which we know it will never change because we are using absolute value, which is 350 pixels. And since it's pixels, wherever it stayed, that's the only place it's going to be. So whether I increase anything on the screen or I don't change anything, as you can see, it is not changing at all. But if I want this parent too to depend on the browser, because I know that it is under the body, so instead of me using the pixels here too, what I can just use is to use maybe like 90%. So this one too is on width, because that's what the browser will do. It will, this one, this one now, it needs to depend on container. Container too is depending on its own parent. And what is the parent of the container? If you look at it, it's under the body. So whatever the width of the body, then the container will take 90% of it. So it will give it that one its own value. Again, to this one too will now come here. Whatever the final value this one get, that one too will take 50% of it. And that's how it will work. So now, as you can see, 90, it will leave the remaining 10%. And no, we are dealing with percentage. If the body change, that one too will change, which is something you can see here. So if we go back to the container, look at the H1. As you can see, this is the 50% of this parent. So if you look at the container too, this is the 90% of the parent. So now, if I change this stuff, if I change the body, can you see that it's changing too? Because the body has changed, it needs to recalculate the new value of 90%. And since this one too has changed, the inner one too will calculate its own value. So you don't need to start doing a lot of changes. So we have places you are going to use relative, and we have places you are going to use absolute. But most of the time, what you always use is this relative unit, because you want them to depend on each other. And when that stuff that depend on change, then all those other ones too will recalculate the value. Now here, we don't need to start coming down like, okay, come to this screen and now change the value yourself. No, the browser knows how to figure out all these things automatically there, depending on the value. So if I increase the browser here, as you can see, it's changed because it needs to calculate 90% of the body. The body is from this white here to this white here. Because if you go to the body, and can you see where the body is? So now it needs to take 90% of that. So again, to this yellow one needs to take 50% of this red part. And that's where the percentage comes in. So percentage is useful when you want a relation between child and parent. So parent is having this particular property. The value that is there, go there and take this percentage of it. And it's going to give you what you are expecting. So that's the basic stuff about percentage there like that. So if you increase this thing, it will change. And if you reduce this thing, it will reduce. But what if you want the percentage to be based on the screen, not on the body itself? Because if you look at the body, you see that there is some space at the top from the body. You know that the body too did not touch everything. So what if you need the screen, not the body, or you don't want this to be between the parent and child? You want it to be between that element and the screen that you have available. And like everything that's inside this white is the screen. So what if you want the stuff? So let me open this, my pen tools, so that I can draw the line. So let me wait for it. No, that's disabled this stuff. Let me quit and start again. It has disabled all the features. All right, so let me wait for it. All right, it's back. So now this is the screen. So from here to here, this is the what we call viewport height. So VH, this is it. So from here to here is 100% VH. So from here to here is what we call 100 viewport width. So now, if you now want to take any percentage of this screen, then you can use this VW or VH to deal with it. It's percentage too, but that percentage is depending on the screen, not the parent. when you're using this one here, the percentage is going to depend on the parent. So this one is between parent and child. But when you're using these two here, they are depending on the screen. So the VW is the horizontal one, while the VH is the count. So which is the height. This is the width. So V there is just a few ports. Few port is this entire white area, like the visible area where you are putting all your content there is what we call viewport. And don't forget it can change too. Because if I reduce it here now, the viewport has changed, the width has changed. Again, too, the height too can change because you can reduce the height of your browser too. So if I reduce the browser now, the viewport height too has changed. So you now want your element to depend on this viewport because there is something you want to do later on. You want the stuff to cover the entire screen, not in the parent where it is coming from, but the screen itself. So that's where this field VW and the VH comes in there like that. So, and how do we use it? Now, instead of us depending on the parent, so I don't want to depend on the parent again. I just want this thing to be, if I use 70% now, you see that this thing is going to be 70% of its parent. But now if I use 70 VW, it will not be using parent again. It will not be using the screen. So it's not calculating the percentage. It's not calculating 70% again based on this parent. It's calculating it based on the viewport. For example, here now let me use 300 pixels or 320 again here, and let's change this one back to percentage so that you can see the parent is here and it's calculating 70% based on the parent. But now we don't want to use parent again. We want to depend on the screen. So save it now. Can you see that it's now going outside? The same 70, but the unit is different. As you can see, the calculation too is different. If it is percentage, it's depending on parent. But if it's VW here, it's not depending on parent again. It's depending on the entire screen. So from here, from here to this white area here, that's the 100% VW there. So from here to this side, this is our 100. Let me increase this in. So that is going to be our 100 VW. So from this one like this, and for this is going to be 100 VH. Now we are not talking to this yellow box here to take 70% out of the 100%, and that's right, it stopped here. So from here to here now, this is the 70%. Later on, we're going to remove all this extra white space that we have there when we get to the course. Now we don't need to be seeing all this extra white space so that our calculation is not going to be wrong because there's some little off there. It's supposed to start from the edge, but because the body is having some stuff around it that we're going to talk about when we get to the box model, when we're talking about padding and margin, we are going to remove all this thing because we don't want the browser to be doing this thing for us. Now imagine, can you see the background now? It's not touching the edge. I want it to touch. So we're going to remove all of them later on. But from here to here, this is our 100 VH. And from here to here, this is our 100 VW there like that. And we have some other relative units that you can use too, and they are going to work. But for now, these are the one you need: the pixels, the RAM, percentage, VW, and this VH. When we get to the grid property later on, I will bring in this FR there because that's when you'll be using this FR like that. But for now, we don't need it. And this other one too, they are not commonly like that, but it's something that you can use or you can read more about them. But we need to focus on what we need now, or the one you always use every time, instead of us just talking about something that we're not going to use now there. So units are very important anytime you need to use some of the value here because they are depending on a unit, and based on the unit you supply, you see different change on the screen. You can see the same 70 that I'm using, but the unit is doing something else on the page. So because percentage is based on the parent, while the VW is based on the screen there like that. So the REN is based on the font size of the HTML. While pixels is always pixels. So the 10 is 10, 20 is 20, and so forth like that. And that's how this thing works on the page. So the next thing we need to talk about here is going to be color representation. So the next thing we need to talk about is going to be color representation. And if you note, I've been using color since, but I've been only using one way of representing color. So in CSS, we have these three major ways of representing color. So we have the named color, which is what I've been using since. Just mention the name of the color and you're good to go. But when you're working with a real design there, or if you're even trying any design that will look nice or attractive to the user, you can't be using this named color because they are too sharp. There's a lot of contrast that are there. So they are really sharp. So what you want to do is for you to be able to mix different colors together to form whatever color that you want to use. And they used to give you this nice color without too much of a contrast there like that. Because if you are using name color, is always having a lot of things that you don't want in that color. And that's where this other one comes in, where we have this RGB. We have this RGBA. For the A, I'll be bringing it later on. So we have this HSL. We have this hexadecimal color here. So you can represent your color in any of these methods. You can use any of them there. So we have the named color, which is something I've been using since here. So this yellow that I mentioned here, the red that is here, the blue and so forth like that, they are referred to as a named color. So because their name is what you are using. So you are not using anything else. But this is not what we want. Or we have other ways of representing color that we're going to be using later on instead of this name. The later I'll be using name color is when I just want to explain something and I don't care about the color. That's why you just see me using all this red, yellow, blue, whatever stuff. But if you are working in a real sense, I won't use any of this color because it will not make the design to look like the way I want it to be. I like that. If you look at this now, see that this is green, but this is not pure green. So, and again too, you see that there's a lot of green going on here too, which see the combination of the color. It makes everything look more nice and more appealing than you just put the normal green into the stuff. So how do you bring colors out without you mentioning their name? That's where this other mode comes in there. So we have this RGB, which is a function that the CSS is giving us to generate color based on these three primary colors. So we have the red, green, and blue. So RGB allows you to mix these three colors together to form another color. And as you can see here, this is how you are going to use it. You have RGB, you have X, comma Y, comma Z, and comma Z. Or if you don't want to use comma, you separate them with space. So it will still work. But you always see me using this method, or even the code set. This is what they will be generating for you there like that. And what is this X? What is Y? What is Z? This is the amount of the color you want for each one of them. And for this X and Y, these are the valid value you can use. So for X or Y or Z, whatever value you have to use must be in between this range, inclusive. So whatever value you want to use for this X, Y, Z, it has to be between this 0 to 255. So like that. For example here, that H1 again, I want to give it color. The color is going to be RGB, as you can see here. So you need to supply the value for X, Y, and Z. And X, Y, and Z is just the RGB, which is the same thing as your red, green, and blue. So R for red, G for green, and B for blue. And whatever value you have to supply here will be in this range. So for the red, I want to use 100. For the green, I want to use 50. So which means there is not much of green. And for the blue, I want to use 200, which is like more blue in this color. We are using more blue. As you can see that the color is going towards the blue, but it's still a mixture of the red, green, and the blue. And as you can see here now, this is going to give us this kind of a nice blue color on the page there. And this one now, I'm using it in another file. So let me go to the correct file where I'm supposed to be using it so that we can see it on the page. So which is supposed to be here, because this is another file entirely. So saved, and now we have the color. It's not the pure blue that you use. You just see the difference between them. So it is a normal blue, which is the name one. So if you just use blue, see how like the contrast and a lot of things too shining that we don't want there like that. But this blue, more cool and mixture of the other color to get what we have right now. So this is RGB. So the first one is the amount of red that you want. The second one is the amount of the green, and the last one is blue. So if I had to, can you see now? The fight is now in between these two because they are the one that have the highest number there. So you can see it's going towards, it's still blue, but it's kind of moving towards the green. Or if I use like 250 like this, as you can see now, since green is not much, so it will move towards the green, but it's still close to the blue side like that. Or if I return this one back, and this one is 200 too, so it's now in between red and blue, as you can see now, which is now giving all this pink-ish color, because now it's now in between this blue and red, not between green and blue again, like that. And it's something VS Code actually have this in. Just go there and just move to any color that you want add there. So it will generate the code instantly for you. And again, what are all these things? I'll talk about them when we get to this HSL, because that's when you be changing the shade. So yeah, this is what we call the color wheel. So for the color wheel, it's like a circle, and that circle, it holds all these primary color that you can mix together. Starting from red, it's enter yellow, from yellow to green, from green to blue, then from blue to this pink, then it go back to red, because it's like a circle. 0 and 360 are the same thing, because if you start from 0 and you roll to 360, you are going back to where you start, and that's why it stop back at the red. But this red of this one is more of to the yellow and red. The one of this side is more of blue and the red here, but it's still, so this side is where you'll be changing the color type that you want. Then when you change the color type, then what is the shade of that color, or the tint? So the tint, we are going towards the white side of the color. The shade, you are going to the darker side of the color, or you can even have it at the middle, which is here, like this. So which means you want the pure of this particular color, which something I don't use because it's kind of too sharp on the, but you are still mixing colors together like that. So it's not totally pure blue, but it's a mixture of as you can see, we don't really have red. I think we are not using red at all. And again, too, we really have a little let's say green, but the highest here is just the blue, because the highest is 255 and we're using 252. It's just 3 this thing that is remaining. So like that. Or if you want to use blue, just turn the other one to 0. So which means other one are not present. The only thing that is there is just blue, which is the same thing as you typing blue. So this is what the blue is just doing behind the scene, like that. So that if you use if the two of them are doing the same thing, as you can see, no different. So this text blue, this is what is going to generate behind the scene there, just like the odd and even that I mentioned that time. So all these CSS have some predefined value for some of these things that you can quickly use instead of typing the long form of it like that. So this is one way of representing color. This is another way by using the named color. So you can use the name one, or you can use the RGB mode. The other one that is here, as you can see, there is this RGB A. This A is what we call alpha channel. But you're not going to see the effect right now because the background we have is white and it's just pure color. But when we get to the background property, you're going to see this in action. So this one allows you to see what is at the back of your color. It allows you to see through the color. Right now, all this one, you cannot see whatever at the back of it. So if the color is at the top and something that's at the back, you cannot see that thing. But in order for you to be able to see what is at the back of the color, you can now apply this alpha channel. And the A is between the 0 and 1. 0 means 0%, 1 means 100%. So when you say 1, which is the default value here for RGB, when you say RGB, alpha channel there is just 1. So it's something you can change, but it's 1 by default, which means you can never see what is at the back of that color. So if you reduce the value, or the value is getting down towards 0, then you keep seeing what is at the back of the color, depending on the percentage that you're using. So if you use 0.5 now, that's 50% transparent. So which means you can still see the color and you can see what is at the back of it too. And if you use 0, it means you cannot see the color at all.
what you only see is what is at the back of the color, and that's what the transparency is doing there, because that's how the only thing, which means the color is transparent. You cannot see the color, you can only see what is at the back of that color. You see it more in action when we get to some design that is showing the content and the back, because you are going to have color, but that color needs to show what's at the back of it too. So in order for you to do something like that, you need to use this RGBA. You can use RGB2 to do it, but for older browser, you still see that people are using this one. But the RGB2 can do it. The same work that this one can do, you can actually supply this A for it too. It will work. But it will work in all these new browser. So if you want to make this into work in old browser, you always use this method here. So that's the RGB, which is really common. If you go to site, you see that most of their color code, they are always in this RGB mode here, but that's not the only one. It can be any other mode color. So if you inspect this one now, which is they are using gradient here, but if you inspect, go under the style, don't forget, this will tell you whatever style that element. So as you can see, these are the style. This is where it's coming from. These are the, but if you look at it now, can you see that it's using the RGBA? This one is using the RGBA, and as you can see, you use 0.94. No, that number, the last one is between 0 and 1. So which means this one too, it will allow you to just see a tiny bit of what is at the back of it. It's 94, it's just as if you are using 1, because it's really close to 1. But assuming it's close to 0 side, like, half, 0.5 is half, then anything less than 0.5, you really see what is at the back compared to the color. And anything below 0.5, you only see that color compared to what is at the back of it. And this one is close to 1 already, like that. So you won't really see too much of what is going on. And if you check some other element on the screen too, because it's not just about this one alone. So let me scroll up. So where are you? What's wrong with the browser? So scroll down a little bit and pick this text that is here. So yeah, this P. And if you scroll down, you see that you see where it's getting the value for the color there, like that. As a BS, where are you getting? So I've not talked about this mode. This is another mode here, as you can see. Another way of representing color that we're going to get into soon, like that. So where are you getting your color from? Yeah, so look at it. So, and if you look at it, you see that it's drawing line on some other stuff. So what that thing is telling you that he's not using that, he's getting that thing from somewhere else. Because if you are using multiple selector on one element, and each one of them are using the same property, it will draw line on top of the one that is not using. So it's telling us here that the font size here is that I'm using is not coming from this selector. It's coming from another selector. And then it's not drawing line on top. It's using it. The one that have line is not using it. So for now, you already know that, oh, this is the reason why this is not showing what you want on the screen. But why is it not showing it? Is because all these your selector too, they have power. Just like they are doing plus, minus, and multiplication too. No, they are operator, like they are mathematical operator, like that. But they have power. Multiplication and division have more power than the. So here too, all this your selector too, they have their grade, which we are going to talk about later on. But for now, we are only going to be using one selector to affect our element. But you can affect your element in like with different selector. But which one is it going to use if they are the same property? It will pick the one that has the highest power at it. But this one did not have power. Now this selector did not have power. That's why it's not using it. But if you scroll up, you see the one is using for the font size. Or scroll down, depending on where it's picking it from, like that. Can you see what is happening? Can you see now? So he's picking it from here. He's not picking this one. Why is he not picking it? It's because of what we define here. We define it that on the screen, like when you get to a bigger screen, this is what you're going to be using. And we'll get to that one when we're talking about responsiveness. Now I told you that the site can behave differently based on the view. Look at this content now. You see that they are side by side on a bigger screen. But now if you go to a small screen, you see that it will go down. They are not side by side again. They are now on top of each other, because there's no way you place them side by side on a small screen. So you're going to see how to handle all this one when we're talking about the responsiveness like that. But you can apply different style from different places on your elements there like that. So, and you can apply colors by using different modes. So you can use the name color, which is what you can see on this side that have been used. Apart from that, you can use the RGB mode to apply color. Apart from that one, we have this HSL mode. And what does this one do? So we use this one to apply a color to, but it's based on the shade and lightness. So this one, I always use it anytime I need to have a lighter version of that color or a darker version of that color. Just like what I mentioned here. You see that in VS Code, you can generate a shade of the color. So this is the same color, but this is light, and this is the dark one. So how do you do it? You know, this is not easy to do it with this RGB here. But with this HSL, you can quickly get a lighter version or a darker version of a particular color easily there, like that. And the first value that is there, the H, is a number between 0 and 360, because it's, you know, don't forget it's coming from color. With that H is what we call the hue. So the H is what we call the hue. Let me put it here. So the H is what we call the hue. So it's known as hue. So this is saturation. So how pure is the color? So we have the saturation. So the L here is the lightness. So this one control the lightness of the color, which is what I just mentioned now. So how dark or how light is your color? So this is what you'll be using. So the hue is what you use to define the color you are looking for. Is it red or blue or green? Then once you got the color, the next thing is how pure is it? Do you want it to be pure or you want it to be less pure there, like that? If you everything, you can do it from VS Code. So all these things that I'm talking about, they are in VS Code. You can see that the color is more pure here compared to this color here. See that the color is not pure. When it's here, it's pure. But when it's around this side, it's not pure. So you can use this S now to talk about the percentage of the pureness here. So 100%, it means the color is totally pure. And again, to this lightness is what you can now use to control the dark and the light of the color. And this one is really useful anytime I want the background to be a lighter version of the text that is inside it, or I want the text inside to be light and the background is going to be darker version of that color. It's still the same color, but one is light and one is dark. So HSL will help you with this one easily, like that. So the first thing you supply inside the HSL the first thing that you supply inside HSL is the color code on the wheel. So don't forget the wheel is this thing. This is what I'm calling wheel. And each one of them have a code attached to them. So starting from 0 all the way to 360 or back to 0. That's just the stuff like that. So if I use 0 now, we know that we are dealing with red. But how pure or is that red? So I want to use half of it. Then how light or dark is the color? 50 is halfway, so which means it's not light and it's not dark. Then anything below 50, you are going towards the dark area. Anything above 50, you are going towards the light. So if I use 50 here too, it means here we want to have red. But to see that the red too is not that red, like because we are only using 50% of it. If you want to use the normal red, you see that you just put 100% there, and it's going to give us the red that we are. Can you see now? So it's giving us the same red, which is, can you see where it is? It is here. So it's here, and it is hanging here because it is really pure, 100% of it. But we don't want to use 100% of it. I want to use 50%. Again, too, I don't want it to be light. I want it to go to the dark area. So I need to reduce it maybe like 30, like this. And once it's saved, as you can see, it's still red, but it's dark version of it. And if I want a darker version of it, like more darker, there I will just go down, because the more you get closer to 0, the more this is going to give you a dark color. And you now, the same stuff, I just need to change the color code and it still give me the same thing for the other. For example, like 270 now, as you can see here, it's going to give me like blue, but it's dark blue like that. And if I go to this 70, to keep giving us this light, because once you go above 50, you are going to the light area of that color. And if it is 50, then it is in between. So for the color here, it's using 50%, and if I want, I can use 100% of it like that. So this is HSL, and this one is really useful for what I mentioned. So yeah, I want the color since I'm using, so let me just use this one. So this one is going to be 80, the color is going to be 80, the background is going to be the same, but with That one is going to be dark, which is going to give this nice design like that. So is this the same thing, but this one is going to go to around that 20. So save it now. Can you see the design? The back, the background is the darker version of the text on top of it. So it always gives this nice design because this is the color theory stuff. When you put this light or you just reverse the stuff, it will give you this nice design. If you don't want to use this one, if you want, it can be color. Why this one is going to be background. So it depends on which one you want to use. And as you can see, it always gives you this nice design because it's the same color. The only thing you're just changing is the lightness that you're tweaking there. And it will always give you this nice design that you always see in a lot of design that you see, as you can see here now. It's still the same green, whatever stuff they use here, but this is a lighter one. So when it sits on top of it, it will give you that nice design that you're seeing. This one too is not white. It's not totally white. It's dark green, but the shade of it, they go to that light area, which is something I can do here too. If I want this to be closer to white a lot, I can just use like 95 here. So it look like it is white, but it's not really white. So it look like it's white, but it's not white. So because, but now if it's 100%, that means it is white. 100% is white. Once you get to 100%, it is totally white because that means the light is much. And again, to when it's totally zero, it means it's black. Totally zero is black, 100 is white. Then anything in between will give you what you are looking for there like that. So HSL is really useful. And as you can see now, that is not looking nice again because I'm still close to around this 20. But if you go to a bigger number, then it will give you that nice design that you are looking for, which I need to use 80 to make it look more nicer like this. So this is how this thing works. So it allows you to apply all these colors in different modes. And as you can see, it's not just for the text alone. It can be for any other thing that needs color. Anywhere you need to use color, this is the mode that you can use for any one of them. Whether it is background or it is the border later on, and anywhere you need color, you can use any one of them to generate the color like that. So the other one we have, the same thing too, it have its own alpha. If you want the color to be, like allow you to see what at the back of it. So you can add the A into the stuff. And the last one that is useful there is this hexadecimal here. So this is another mode that you can use to generate color. So this is another mode that you can use to generate color. Let me be fast. I don't want it to go more than this, but the size will be too big. So you can use this 1 2 to generate colors there. And the hexadecimal there is just this pattern where you have this hash, then followed by 3x code, or followed by 4, or followed by 6, or followed by 8 self. If you want to create, because this one too you can use to generate the this thing, the transparent mode there. So it allows you to allow the user to see what is at the back of the color. But I don't use it because it's not easy to generate its own this thing. Its own is not using 0 and 1 for alpha. It's still using the X code to generate alpha, which is not something that you want to be calculating from your head like that. But you know it's more easier for this one. Just mention 0 1 point something and so forth like that. You quickly get this one. So for the X, it started with this, then followed by 3, 4, or 6 hexadecimal code. Hexadecimal code is just your 0 to 9 and A to F. So just mix them together and you get whatever you are looking for. So AF, 3A like this. And as you can see, it will give us the color code that thing is representing. No, I'm using 4 here. If I want, I can just use this one and it will still work. No, this is 3, or I can use 4, or you can use 6. So it will still work. But you know the color has changed because now what it's doing is the first 2 is for red, the second 2 is for the green, and the last 2 is for blue. So it will convert all these things to this code that you type here. So you know, don't forget this, all these things they are base 16. So it will convert them to base 10. When you convert it to base 10, you see that it will get the value that thing is giving you there, which you can use VS Code to do it instead of you doing it yourself. Just click on this side. It will change the mode that you want. So this is what we have. So I can change it to HSL, or I can change it to this RGB. So this our that first letter that we type, it is 175. The second two that we type, it is 61. The last one, it is this, which is something you can calculate yourself. So what you just do, pick them and convert it to base 10. And how do you convert it to base 10? You know the A is 10. That's